protecting Main Street from Wall Street. It's time for Money Unleashed with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn.
You have to have a plan where you know if the market's going to go up, what happens next. And you also have to have a plan where if it doesn't go the way you think, you know what you're going to do.
It's time to put you back in control of your money.
I'm not trying to predict the weather, which is kind of what we're talking about, right? It's predicting the stock market. I'm trying to build a better boat.
This is Money Unleashed with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn.
Welcome to the Money Unleashed podcast with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn. We are the vice presidents of Hoffman Financial Group. We've got new episodes for you on Monday and Friday. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Kyle, now we're going to talk about something we're not going to tell the kids. Don't tell the kids. Well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about legacy planning, right? Now, obviously, at some point in time, your kids should know what's going on with legacy, but you don't need to be a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt to appreciate this story, right? Because when it comes to generational wealth, Next Avenue warns that a good way for families to go from riches to rags is failing to properly pass down those assets. How and why does this happen? So a 2023 survey of the Williams Group found that when families fail to transfer their wealth to the next generation, 60% do so because of the lack of communication and trust in the family. So we see a lot of different hiccups here when it involves legacy planning. So I'm going to throw it to you. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see families make when they come in here and we start tackling the legacy issue?
I think the first mistake is awareness, right? So one of the things that I teach my teams in business is you got to know your numbers, right?
Yep.
If you don't understand your data, if you don't understand your numbers, how can you even make a decision? So
you can't get better.
Yeah, so how are we even going to have this conversation if we're not willing to look at it? So the first thing I want to say is we can see the numbers, and we've talked about this on the show before. There's an estimated $84 trillion that's going to be handed over to the next generation. The second thing I want to say is for a lot of the older baby boomers, well, their kids are 55, 60 years old, right? Like we talk about Generation X, and sometimes I feel like we talk about Generation X almost lumped in with the millennials like they're in their 30s and 40s. A lot of them are in almost their 60s. That's a very capable, confident, mature adult. Why would you not have that conversation with that person about the wealth that's coming in their direction, whether it's $1 million or $10 million? So the first thing I think, just on a very basic level, is you've got to have the conversation. Now, you said before we started the segment, and I think you're right, there's a time and a place for that.
Yeah, so for me, the fastest way to screw up your kids being successful human beings is to let them know you got lots of money when they're young, right? You know, my girls ask me all the time, Daddy, how much money do you make? I'm like, I make $10 a month.
You really
I tell Whitney and Gwen, I make $10 a month. They're like, really? I'm like, I'm a really good saver.
So my son is almost 4, and to him, the biggest number is the number 5.
That's a big number.
So, man, if I told him I made 5, he would be like, wow.
Yeah.
Dad makes $5.
You make 5? That's a big number. Well, I tell them 10, and then they call me out because like, Daddy, dinner costs $200. I'm like, well, you know, we save up for these dinners.
Ooh, so remind me again, how old are your daughters?
They're 8 and 9.
All right, so at 10, basically the kids are price checking you. They're like, hey.
They're already price checking, right? But, here's the thing. You know, you want your kids, and I tell them, listen, we're normal human beings, just like everybody else, and you got to go get an education, you got to go get a good job, and you got to hit the ball on your own. That's a big deal. Now, I think it would be a mistake personally, and it all depends. Everyone's a little bit different. You know, it depends on the maturity of your kids. But I would probably start talking to your kids about retirement or, you know, what their legacy is going to look like when they're getting closer to 30, right? Because they're past college, hopefully. You know, they've got their foothold on their career and they're starting to grow it on their own. You know, then you can start talking about what may or may not happen in the future and start planning for it that way. And then that way they're aware, right, while they're already creating their own career. And now you don't have a child who's just waiting for you to pass away and giving up on their life where they could be creating their own wealth versus just waiting for somebody else's, right? So that's the biggest thing that I see with people. And I imagine most Americans would agree with me. You don't want to tell your kids that you're doing great, right? Because then they don't have to get good grades and they don't have to push hard like you did. And we want to make sure our kids are also pushing hard and pulling on the rope as well. But I think one of the other things I want to ask you a question about this is about Roth conversions, right? Because a lot of things changed in 2019 involving the Secure Act. So just to remind everybody, if you're out there and you don't know what the Secure Act is, here we go. So back in 2019, a couple of different rule changes happened. And the biggest one that most people remember is what the required minimum distribution age was 70 and a half. And what that age means is that at 70 and a half, now you've been punting on taxes on your 401ks and IRAs for a very long time. That's when the government starts requiring you to take money out to satisfy some of those taxes that you haven't been paying on. And everybody was very happy with that because it went from 70.5 to 72. But another rule most people weren't concentrating on was the fact that if you get bequeathed money or someone leaves you an IRA after 2019, the rules changed, right? So before 2019, someone could be bequeathed an IRA, and you can create an income stream out of that and simply just take required minimum distributions out every single year. Mom and dad's money would last forever, and that's what they intended it to do. What changed is that in 2019, if you get bequeathed an IRA, and this is not for spouses, this is for specifically for children, which is why we're talking about legacy planning, is that they have to take all that money out in 10 years, right? And that's a big gotcha on the tax situation because let's say your kids are doing well. They're making let's just say $50,000 a year, and you leave them a $2 million IRA. Now they've got to take $200,000 out a year for the next 10 years, and that's going to bump them up into the next tax bracket, and that's how the government gets their money back faster. So you have to have these types of conversations, but this is relating towards Roths and Roth conversions, Kyle. So why is it so important for people to start converting to Roth when they get into retirement?
First of all, I'm going to call Eric out on the air. He keeps saying the word bequeath. The South Georgia is going to come in out in me, and I'm just going to say handed the money.
Handed the money. Okay, well, you can say that. Right? Potato.
So however you see it, right, there's a massive transfer of wealth, and we've got to talk about the transfer and how to make it efficient, right?
Yep.
So one of the ways to do that is to talk about this from the standpoint of tax and account structure. So I was working with a gentleman yesterday, and I think it was like 85% of his money was in a taxable account, like a brokerage account. And so he said, hey, do I need to do Roth conversions, right? So he only had about 10 to 15% of his money in a retirement account. So in his case, not really. Now, could he do the Roth conversion, clean it up? Sure. The way to start thinking about this is the word diversification. So you're either going to need to diversify with time or you're going to diversify with more people. So I was working with another couple, and they said, hey, we heard you talking about Roth conversions on the radio. We wanted to take a look and see if we need to do Roth conversions. And instead of asking them about their money, my first question was about their family. I said, okay, how many kids and how many grandkids do you have? And how many of the grandkids are older than, say, 20? Well, when we looked at it, they've got 3 kids and they've got 3 grandkids that are in their 20s now. So there's a good chance that when they pass away in 15 years, they've got 6 to 7 people that will inherit this money based on the ages and appropriateness of those ages. So in their regard, they can diversify the assets with the people, right?
Yep.
So what we're talking about here is spreading out the tax load. That way it doesn't fall on one person. So if you're living in a world where you've got one child, they have no kids, and so that's the only heir, and you've got $1 million or $2 million, and it's going to grow to 3 or 4, then you're living in a world where they're going to have a huge tax problem, so you need to do some early tax planning. So a Roth conversion specifically is taking money out of the 401k, the TSP, the IRA, all the acronyms of retirement accounts, and moving it early over into the Roth account. So most people have heard, hey, you can only put a certain amount in the Roth each year. That's true, but you can backdoor the money, meaning you can take it from a traditional IRA at any amount. So if you had $1 million in a traditional IRA, you could move that whole $1 million over to a Roth account. Now, the problem with doing a large amount like that would be the government's going to report $1 million income, and they're going to take you to high tax brackets. So there's kind of a sweet spot. So clients a lot of times are saying, okay, what is the sweet spot? It seems to be, from the math that we've looked at and the things that we've done over the last few years, around 20 to 23%. So you kind of want to make a choice to say, okay, do I need to do a Roth conversion? If I do, what am I doing? I'm being willing to move my taxes from, say, like a lot of people in retirement, their taxes are sitting around 15, 16%. If they can get them a little lower, maybe 12, 13, 14. So middle teens. If they've decided to do the Roth conversion, then they've pushed it up maybe 5, 6, maybe 7%. So they're going from, say, 15 to, say, 21, 22. All right. If you make the choice to pay a little more early on taxes, what is the benefit in the long run? Well, the benefit is you have a tax-free compounding, not only in your life, but also in the next generation's life. So there's all kinds of really positive effects if this works for you. Now, some clients come in and say, I don't have any kids. Okay. Be careful. We've found with some people, they should just ignore this in its entirety.
Correct.
Like they come in, they look at it, we work with the CPAs, we talk about the taxes, we look at the structure, and we go, hey, by the way, this sounds really great and powerful, but it means nothing to you. Go old school. Just take as little out tax-wise as you can. So for some people, we've found that we can get their tax rates below 10%, maybe starting at 74%. So for those of you that are worried about paying required minimum distributions, If you do good tax work early, say starting at 59, 60 years old, you may not have to worry about RMDs at all. For others, we've found it makes more sense from a tax standpoint for you to ignore the Roth conversions and lower the taxes on the short-term basis. So this is a very custom, a little bit complicated thing, but the good news is we're willing to have this conversation with you. So if you'll come in, have a cup of coffee, show us what's going on, have a little conversation, we can give you some great insight on whether or not the Roth conversion makes sense for your portfolio and your family.
Yeah, and the reason why Roth is so important, for those of you out there who don't know that, is a Roth is a tax-free account. So if you've had a Roth IRA, you've owned it for 5 years, you're over the age 59 and a half, everything that you put in and all the gains that you take out, Uncle Sam gets none of it. That's why it's important. Now, you said it perfectly. It's a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't make sense, and you need to have a fiduciary advisor. And we are fiduciary advisors. We help people out this with every single day. Let you know if that's something that you want to do. So another thing that I want to touch on when it involves legacy planning and converting to Roth is when you take and convert to Roth and how you do it, right? So I always relate it to like killing a snake. All my clients who are listening are going to laugh because this is my best analogy. So it's like killing a snake when you convert to Roth. Now, if you get $1 million and you chop the head off the snake, right? That means you might see that $1 million go to $600,000 of Roth money. That hurts, right? People they don't want to see the number go down. They just want to see the Roth number go up. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is chopping the tail of the snake until it dies, right? So what does that mean? That means that you're doing it in small chunks or pieces every single year to convert the Roth, so the tax consequence isn't so robust.
You're torturing that poor snake.
I hate snakes. I'm like Indiana Jones. And I also hate taxes, right? So you want to get around that by converting to Roth. Now, I had a client come in the other week, and they had $3 million in an IRA, and they want to convert it now, but it doesn't make any sense because they're making great money and they're in a higher tax bracket. So a lot of my clients are type A, and they're like, I want to start tackling this now. I'm like, well, the best way you can do that, this would be the same advice to everybody out there. If you want more Roth money, it's just as easy as looking inside your 401k. A lot of the new 401k plans have Roth components inside of it, so you can start developing tax-free money while you're still working. Because if you make more than a certain amount as a couple, you're not allowed to have a Roth or contribute to one. So that's a good way to start doing it now. But what I tell most people is you really want to start converting to Roth after you retire. Because after you retire, typically your federal tax bracket goes down due to spending, and then you can convert more. So you can run right up to the line and keep converting. And over time, throughout your retirement, now you can start being in the 10% tax bracket if you do it properly and throughout the rest of your life. And then if you keep doing it until you go visit St. Michael, then your kids get the Roth money. And it's just a much better, more effective way of transferring your wealth to your kids without it going to the government. Because trust me, guys, the government gets tons of money as it is. We don't want to give them any more if we don't have to. And we're here to help you with this every single day. This is a lot of difficult planning. This is a lot of complicated planning, but it's necessary planning. And difficult planning and complicated planning is precisely what we do. Give us a call. Let's put together one of these plans for you today. 404-640-5511. That's 404-640-5511. Or you can find us online at unleashyourmoney.com.
Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn are investment advisor representatives of Brookstone Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor and affiliate of Brookstone Capital Management, LLC. BWA and Hoffman Financial Group are affiliated under common ownership. Registered investment advisors and investment advisor representatives act as fiduciaries for all of our investment management clients. We have an obligation to act in the best interest of our clients and to make full disclosures of any conflicts of interest. Please refer to our firm brochure, the ADV 2A, page 4, for additional information. The Hoffman Financial Group and WSB are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a professional specializing in the field of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of this information for their situation. Any client experiences discussed during the show are unique to that client. They are not meant to imply or suggest you will experience the same results. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested. Any comments regarding safe and secure products and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Fixed insurance and annuity product guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing company and are not offered by Brookstone. Index or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract. Please refer to our firm brochure, the ADV 2A Item 4, for additional information. Hoffman Financial Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Insurance licensed in Georgia, number 163546.